The most intense cab ride of my life with Bruce Willis started on a gray, late afternoon in New York City, with the wind whipping around the corners and the city lights flickering on one by one, as if the day was saying goodnight. He got into the car silently, hidden by a beanie, a scarf, and dark glasses, but his body gave away the exhaustion of someone who'd just left an appointment that lingers long after the doctor stops talking. It wasn't the movie star who sat in the back. It was an ordinary man, holding an envelope as if he were holding a verdict. From that moment on, every word he chose to share with me opened up a piece of a truth that many folks would prefer not to face, while they still have time to change something about their own lives. Throughout that trip, between red lights, impatient horns, and the constant noise of the buses, Bruce talked about diagnosis, forgetting, family, fame, and everything that truly remains when the body and mind start to collect the debt for years lived on autopilot. This story isn't about Hollywood, explosions, or action scenes. It's about legacy, choices, and the urgency of living in a way that makes sense to the person you see in the mirror at night. And while he was deciding right there, inside my cab, what he'd do with the time he had left, a question hung in the air like snow that never quite touches the ground. What does everyone do when they find out the clock has always been running faster than it seemed? On that freezing winter afternoon in New York City, the taxi was parked in front of a discreet medical building on the Upper East Side. The wind bit at your skin, and the streets were covered by a thin layer of freshly fallen snow. The back door of the car opened slowly, and a man quickly got in, bringing with him the cold air and a heavy silence. He was wearing a thick scarf that covered half his face, dark glasses, and a wool beanie pulled down to his eyebrows. The smell of hospital antiseptic drifted from his clothes, mixed with the discreet scent of aftershave. He sat in the back seat and stayed silent for a few seconds, as if he were gathering the strength to speak. His hands trembled slightly as he held a white envelope stamped with the logo of a neurological clinic in the upper corner. His breathing was short, clipped, like someone who'd just received devastating news. When he finally spoke, his voice came out hoarse and low. "Can you take me to Central Park, please?" There was no rush. There was no energy, just a simple request loaded with weight. As I started the engine and began driving through the busy streets, I noticed in the rearview mirror that he avoided looking outside. His eyes, partially hidden by the glasses, were fixed on the envelope he held tightly, as if that paper contained the fate of his entire life. The sound of traffic, horns, sudden braking, pedestrians' voices, seemed distant to him, as if he were in another world. It was like watching someone trying to process the unthinkable, fighting to maintain composure in the face of an internal collapse. A few minutes later, he took off his dark glasses and put them in his jacket pocket. That's when I recognized the face. Bruce Willis. But it wasn't the Bruce from the action movies, the one who faced down terrorists and saved the world with a wry smile. It was a vulnerable, tired man, with deep circles under his eyes and an expression that carried the weight of 1,000 invisible battles. He realized I'd recognized him but didn't say anything, just nodded slightly, like someone accepting that there was nowhere left to hide. The city continued its frantic hustle outside, but inside that cab, time seemed to have stopped. The silence between us was thick, loaded with a story yet to be told. What happened next on that ride would change everything I thought about courage, fame, and the true meaning of strength. After a few minutes of silence, Bruce sighed deeply and began to speak, as if he needed to share that burden with someone, even a complete stranger. "I just left an appointment that changed my life," he said, his voice still trembling. "The doctors confirmed the diagnosis, progressive aphasia. My brain is gradually shutting down." The words came out slowly, each one carrying the weight of an irreversible sentence. He looked at the envelope again, as if he still couldn't believe what was written there. The sound of the taxi heater humming was the only noise filling the space between his sentences. He explained that the condition would rob him of something he'd always taken for granted, the ability to communicate, to remember, to be himself. Imagine waking up one day and not being able to remember your daughter's name, or trying to speak and the words just won't come out, like someone erased the dictionary from your mind, he said, his eyes misty, His voice broke for a moment, and he had to take a deep breath to continue. It was like watching someone face losing himself, piece by piece, and there was absolutely nothing he could do to stop it. As he spoke, the cab moved slowly down Madison Avenue, passing illuminated storefronts and hurried people carrying shopping bags. Life continued normally outside, but inside that car, Bruce's world was falling apart. He recounted that the first signs began months ago, forgetting simple lines on set, difficulty finding common words, moments of sudden confusion. At first, everyone thought it was exhaustion or stress, but the diagnosis revealed a brutal truth. It was the beginning of the end of a battle he couldn't possibly win. Bruce talked about the cruelty of that specific condition, which doesn't just attack memory, but the essence of who we are. "It's not just forgetting where I left the car keys," he said with a bitter smile. "It's forgetting who I am. It's looking at the people I love and not recognizing their faces. It's trying to say, 'I love you,' and not being able to form the words." The pain in his voice was palpable, and the silence that followed was deafening. Traffic stopped at a red light, and for a few seconds, everything was motionless, as if the entire city were holding its breath along with him. I asked if he'd told his family, and he nodded slowly. "They know, and they're trying to be strong, but I see the fear in their eyes. I see that they're already bracing themselves to lose me, even though I'm still here." His voice almost vanished at the end of the sentence. What comes next? When the words fail and the memories fade? How do you say goodbye to an entire life when your time is ticking? As the cab cut across Fifth Avenue, Bruce started talking about the cruel irony of the situation. "I spent my whole life playing invincible heroes," he said, looking out the window. "John McClane faced terrorists and always found a way out. I blew up buildings, saved the world, I never lost. And now I'm facing an enemy I can't punch, I can't shoot, I can't beat." His voice carried a mix of frustration and acceptance, like someone who finally understands that real life doesn't follow Hollywood screenplays. The sound of sirens in the distance seemed to echo the urgency of that revelation. He talked about how strange it is to be recognized as a symbol of strength and resilience, while internally everything is crumbling. People on the street saw him and saw the immortal hero, the one who never gives up, who always gets back up after every fall. But the truth was very different. They don't know that behind that character there's a man who's scared, who cries alone in the bathroom, who wakes up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat thinking about what comes next, he confessed. The difference between the public image and the private reality had never been so painfully clear. Bruce recounted that during the last few months of filming, he had to use earpieces where someone fed him his lines because he couldn't remember them on his own anymore. The whole crew knew, but no one spoke openly about it. It was like a shared secret, a silent conspiracy of compassion. "I saw the pity in their eyes, and that hurt more than any diagnosis," he said, clenching his fists. It was the humiliation of not being able to do what he had always done so naturally, of depending on help for something that was automatic before. The contrast was brutal. On screen, he was indestructible. In real life, he was losing pieces of himself every day. While the world applauded his fictional victories, he was facing real, silent defeats. "You know what the worst part is?" he asked, turning toward me. "It's realizing that none of the skills I used in the movies work for this battle. There's no script, there's no stunt double, there's no cut to redo the scene. It's just me, this diagnosis, and the time I have left." His voice trembled at the end, and the silence that followed was heavy as lead. The cab stopped at another light, and Bruce watched the people crossing the street, each one carrying their own invisible battles. Would any of them imagine that the action hero sitting in that cab was facing the biggest challenge of his life? The answer was no. And maybe that's exactly what made everything even more lonely. The cab turned left, heading toward Central Park, and Bruce began to talk about his family with a different intensity. "You know what haunts me?" he asked, not waiting for an answer. "It's not the films I didn't make, the awards I didn't win. It's the dinners I missed, the school recitals I didn't see, the conversations I postponed, thinking I'd always have time." His voice was heavy with regret, that kind of burden only seen clearly by those who look back. The sound of the tires on the asphalt, wet from the melting snow, punctuated every word, creating a melancholy rhythm. He talked about one specific episode he hasn't been able to forget yet. His youngest daughter, at 7 years old, had drawn a picture of him as a superhero and waited hours to show him when he got home. But that night, Bruce arrived late, exhausted from a day of filming, and barely glanced at the drawing before going upstairs to sleep. She tucked the drawing under her pillow and never mentioned it again. He said, his voice cracking, "I found out years later when I came across that yellowed paper inside one of her old books. And now I might even forget that ever happened." Bruce talked about how his career consumed precious years that would never return. Constant travel, endless filming, meetings that seemed urgent, but which today he doesn't even remember the point of. "I always thought I was building something for them, you know? A legacy, financial security, pride. But what they really wanted was just my time," he said, rubbing his face with his hands. The pain of that late realization was visible, not just in his words but in his slumped shoulders, his heavy breathing, his lost gaze. He mentioned conversations he never had with his older children, difficult subjects he always postponed for a more appropriate moment that never came. "I never talked about my fears, my failures, what I really learned in life," he confessed. "I always kept up that strong man facade, the provider father, the unshakable hero, and now they're going to lose the chance to know who I really am underneath all of that." The weight of that truth hung in the air like the mist that was starting to cover the park's trees in the distance. Bruce stopped talking for a moment and looked at his own hands, as if searching for something that wasn't there anymore. "Time is the only thing we can't buy, win back, or negotiate," he said, almost whispering, "and I wasted so much of it thinking it was infinite." What else would be left unsaid before the words faded forever? As the cab approached Central Park, Bruce started talking about the burden of maintaining a flawless facade when everything inside him was collapsing. "You have no idea what it's like to wake up knowing that millions of people expect you to be strong, invincible, always in control," he said, looking at the car's ceiling. "Every public appearance is a performance, every interview, every photo, every smile. And meanwhile, inside, you're falling apart." The constant pressure to meet the expectations created by decades of heroic roles had become an invisible prison. He recounted the last public events he participated in, where he had to hide the memory lapses and the difficulty forming complete sentences. "There were times when I'd freeze mid-sentence and see the public relations team freak out," he said. "They'd cut in quickly, change the subject, crack jokes to cover it up. It was like being in a circus where I was the sad clown nobody was allowed to see crying. The public image built over 40 years couldn't fall apart overnight. There were contracts, expectations, an entire empire depending on that illusion." Bruce explained that fame creates a bubble where human frailty has no place. "People don't want to see their heroes weak, sick, vulnerable," he said with a heavy sigh. "They want to believe there's someone immune to life's tragedies. And when you break that illusion, they feel betrayed, as if you'd been lying to them the whole time." The weight of carrying that responsibility, of being the pillar of strength for millions while fighting his own collapse, was crushing. The sound of an ambulance passing in the distance seemed to underscore the urgency of that silent battle. He mentioned conversations with his team, where they discussed strategies for managing the narrative when the truth finally came out. It was surreal. "We were planning how to announce my deterioration as if it were a movie launch," he said, shaking his head in disbelief. "Press releases, carefully drafted statements, strategic timing, all to control how the world would see me falling apart." The corporate coldness of that process contrasted violently with the human pain he was experiencing. Bruce looked out the window and saw his blurry reflection in the glass. In the end, fame doesn't protect anyone. It just makes everything more complicated, more solitary. You can't cry in public, you can't have a bad day, you can't just be human, he said, his voice almost fading away. And when you finally need compassion, you find out you've built walls so high that no one can reach you. Would it be possible to tear down those walls before it was too late? The cab finally parked near the entrance to Central Park, but Bruce made no move to get out. He stayed there, looking at the snow-covered trees, and then turned to me. "Can I ask you something?" he said, his voice softer. "What do you think will be left of me when I'm not here anymore? The movies? The characters? The action scenes?" The question caught me off guard, and I realized he genuinely wanted an honest answer. The taxi motor was still running, emitting a low rumble that filled the silence between us. I took a deep breath and replied, "Bruce, I grew up watching your movies, but you know what I'm going to remember about this afternoon? It's not John McClane. It's this real man who sat in my cab and had the courage to be vulnerable, to share his pain with a complete stranger. That's legacy, too." He was silent for a moment, processing my words. "You really think so?" he asked, his eyes glistening. "Because I spent decades building a career, and now I wonder if any of it truly matters." I continued, "Legacy isn't about how many people know your name or how many trophies you have on the shelf. It's about how you made people feel, the lives you touched, the moments of kindness nobody recorded." I told him about a client I had years ago, an older man who was dying of cancer. He told me his biggest pride wasn't the company he founded, but the thank you letters he received from employees saying how he changed their lives. That man died in peace because he understood that legacy is human connection, not material achievements, I explained. Bruce nodded slowly, as if those words were opening a new perspective. "My kids won't remember the movies I made," he said. "They're gonna remember if I was present, if I listened to them, if I loved them well, and now I'm racing against time to make sure those memories exist before I forget how to create them." He took the envelope out of his pocket again and held it with both hands. Maybe that's it. Maybe legacy is the love that remains, not the credits rolling on screen. I talked about how every person we cross paths with leaves an invisible mark, and that the true power lies in small, everyday actions. A sincere hug, a word of encouragement, quality time given without rush. You still have time, Bruce. Time to create memories that'll last forever in the hearts of those you love. That's real immortality, I said. He looked at me with gratitude, and a tired smile appeared on his face. Would there still be a chance to rewrite this ending? Bruce took a deep breath and said he'd made a decision that would change everything. "Last week I called my agent and told him I was retiring," he revealed, his voice firm but loaded with emotion. "I canceled all future projects, all scheduled appearances, everything." He was in shock. He tried to convince me to wait, to think it over. But I'd already thought about it, and the answer was clear. I'm not gonna waste the days I have left pretending to be someone else. The determination in his eyes was unmistakable, as if he'd finally found clarity amidst the chaos. He explained that the decision wasn't easy because it meant letting go of an identity built over decades. Being an actor was who I was, or at least who I thought I was, he said. But now I realize I'm so much more than the roles I played. I'm a father, a husband, a friend, and these people need all of me, not just the scraps left over after a day of filming. The sound of children playing in the park in the distance seemed to underscore the simplicity and beauty of that choice, returning to what truly matters. Bruce said his family's reaction was relief mixed with sadness. My wife cried, but not from sadness. She said she was finally going to have her husband back, not the tired ghost who came home late at night, he shared. My kids, too. They understood that I was choosing them, choosing to be present while I can still recognize their faces, say their names, consciously hug them. The emotion in his voice was palpable, and I realized that decision, although painful, had brought him a peace he hadn't felt in years. He talked about the fear of being forgotten, of becoming irrelevant, of watching the world move on without him. Hollywood is cruel like that. The moment you step out of the spotlight, someone else is already taking your place. And part of me feared becoming a footnote, a distant memory, he confessed. But then I realized I'd rather be forgotten by the world and remembered by the people I love than be remembered by millions and forgotten by my own family. The wisdom of that choice echoed in the silence that followed, heavy and profound, like the snow covering the trees outside. Bruce looked at the clock on the cab's dashboard and smiled for the first time since he got into the car. Tonight, I'm going to have dinner with my kids. No phones, no distractions, no rushing. We're going to talk, laugh, Create memories that'll stand up to what's coming, he said, his voice full of hope. And tomorrow I'm going to start writing letters to each of them, for when the words fail me. But before he could proceed with his plans, something unexpected was about to happen. Bruce was just about to get out of the cab when someone tapped on the window on his side. He turned, startled, and his face instantly changed, a mix of surprise, embarrassment, and something like contained joy. Outside stood an older man, gray-haired, wearing a dark wool coat and a nostalgic smile. It was Samuel L. Jackson. "Bruce, dude, it's me. What are you doing here?" Samuel said, opening his arm. Bruce quickly got out of the cab, and the two embraced right there on the frozen sidewalk, like old buddies who hadn't seen each other in years. The sound of the cutting wind and the distant traffic noise created a perfect soundtrack for that unexpected moment. The two started talking, and I realized there was a deep history between them. Samuel mentioned films they made together decades ago, laughs on set, long nights of shooting. "Remember that scene where you almost blew up the set for real?" Samuel laughed out loud, slapping Bruce on the shoulder. "The director nearly had a heart attack." Bruce smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. There was something heavy hanging in the air, something unresolved. Samuel noticed the change in energy, and his expression grew more serious. "You all right, Bruce? You look different." Bruce hesitated, looked at me still sitting in the cab, and then decided to tell him. "Sam, I've got something to tell you. I got a diagnosis, progressive aphasia. My brain is shutting down." The silence that followed was heavy as a rock. Samuel froze for a few seconds, processing those words. Then his eyes welled up with tears. "No, man. No way. You're the toughest of all of us," he said, his voice cracking. "You're indestructible." Bruce shook his head slowly. "Nobody is, Sam. Nobody." Samuel pulled Bruce into another hug, longer, tighter. "I'm so sorry, brother. I really am sorry," he whispered. When they pulled apart, Samuel held Bruce's shoulders and looked deep into his eyes. "Listen here. You made a mark on my life in ways you can't even imagine. Not just as an actor, but as a friend, as an example. And nobody can take that away from you." Bruce nodded, emotional. "Thanks, Sam. I needed to hear that." The two stood there in the cold, sharing memories, regrets, and words that should have been said a long time ago. Before they said goodbye, Samuel said something that echoed in the air. "We always think we have time, Bruce. We always think there's going to be a next time to say what matters. But sometimes this is the last time, and I'm glad it was today." They hugged again, and Samuel slowly walked away, waving as he disappeared into the crowd. Bruce got back into the cab, his eyes red but with a genuine smile on his face. "You know what that taught me?" he said, looking at me. "That reconciliation and truth can't wait." And in that moment, he decided to do something that would change everything. Bruce sat back down in the rear seat of the cab, but this time with a different energy. He took his cell phone out of his pocket, looked at the screen for a few seconds, and then said, "I need to do something, right now, before it's too late." I asked what he had in mind, and he answered with urgency in his voice. "I'm going to record video messages for everyone I love, for when I can't talk anymore, for when I forget who they are, for when the words completely fade away." His determination was moving, and I realized that moment would mark a crucial turning point in his journey. He started right there, in the back seat of the cab. He opened his phone's camera, adjusted the angle, and pressed record. "Hi, Rumor. It's Dad. If you're watching this, it's 'cause I can't say these things myself anymore," he began, his voice choked with emotion. "I want you to know that you've always been my greatest achievement. Not the movies, not the awards. You. I remember the day you were born like it was yesterday. I held you in my arms and I promised I'd always protect you. And even if my brain forgets, my heart never will." Tears streamed down his face as he spoke, but he didn't stop. Every word was a gift, a piece of eternity being recorded. He recorded messages for each of his children, for his wife, for his parents. Each video was different, loaded with specific memories, advice, declarations of love, and pleas for forgiveness. "Scout, you've always been the strongest one. Don't let the world dim your light. Keep being exactly who you are," he said in one of the videos. In another, to his youngest daughter, "Tallulah, my little one, I'm sorry for all the times I wasn't there, but know that every time I was away, I was thinking of you. You taught me what unconditional love is." The cab became a mobile confessional, a sanctuary of truths finally set free. After recording several messages, Bruce stopped, emotionally drained, but visibly relieved. "You know what's liberating about this?" he said, looking at me. "It's that now, no matter what happens to me, they're gonna have these words forever. They'll be able to hear me saying that I love them, that I'm proud of them, that they are the best of me." He carefully saved all the videos in a folder, then backed them up in the cloud. "This is my real legacy. It's not in Hollywood. It's right here, in these messages." His phone vibrated with a notification, but he ignored it. Nothing else mattered in that moment. Bruce looked out the window and saw the sun beginning to set, painting the sky orange and pink. "Thank you for giving me this space, for listening to me, for reminding me what really matters," he said, reaching out his hand to me. I shook his hand firmly, feeling the weight of that moment. "The time we have left is all we've got, Bruce, and you just used it in the best possible way," I replied. He nodded, opened the cab door, and got out. But before closing it, he turned around one last time. "This was the most important day of my life," he said, and then he disappeared into the crowd, leaving behind a lesson I'll never forget. After Bruce got out of the cab, I sat there for a few minutes, processing everything that had happened. The engine was still running, the heater humming softly, but my mind was miles away. I looked at the empty back seat and realized that afternoon had changed something deep inside me. Bruce Willis, the indestructible hero of so many movies, had taught me the most powerful lesson about courage. It isn't about never falling, but about accepting the fall and still choosing to love, choosing to be present, choosing to live fully until the very last moment. The city continued its hustle and bustle outside, but inside the cab, the silence was sacred. I thought about how many people postpone life, waiting for the perfect moment to say what needs to be said, to do what needs to be done, waiting until they have more time, more money, more security. But the brutal truth is, time waits for no one. Mortality doesn't send warnings. It doesn't make an appointment. It doesn't ask permission. Bruce discovered this in the most painful way possible, but he still had the wisdom to act while there was time. How many of us will have that same opportunity? How many will realize too late that what matters has always been right in front of us, hidden by the rush and the illusion that there will always be tomorrow? I reflected on the meaning of purpose. Throughout his entire life, Bruce built a monumental career, achieved fame and fortune, became a global icon. But that afternoon, sitting in my cab, he revealed that none of that held weight compared to the love of family, human connection, and simple moments of genuine presence. Purpose isn't about how much you accumulate, but about how much you give. It's not about how many people know your name, but about how many people feel your love. It's not about being immortal on screen, but about being unforgettable in the hearts of those you touched. The urgency of living fully isn't about doing more, achieving more, being more. It's about being more present, loving more deeply, accepting our own frailty more completely. Bruce showed that true strength isn't in hiding our wounds, but in exposing them with courage. It isn't about never crying, but about crying and still moving forward. It isn't about being invincible, but about being human, completely, intensely, vulnerable, and beautifully human. How many people spend their whole lives building armor when they should be opening their arms? I looked at the clock on the dashboard and realized it was already getting dark. The lights of New York City were starting to switch on, one by one, like earthly stars guiding the paths of millions of hurried people, each one of them carrying their own invisible battles, their own stored regrets, their own unsaid words. I knew that story needed to be shared, not as gossip or sensationalism, but as an urgent call for everyone to reassess their priorities before it's too late. Bruce gave me a gift that afternoon, the reminder that life is now, not tomorrow. And it's up to each one of us to decide what to do with this precious time we still have left. On that cold afternoon in New York City, Bruce got in and out of my cab, but he left behind something that couldn't fit in the car. A living reminder that time waits for no one. He had fame, money, history in Hollywood. But what hurt him most weren't the films he wouldn't make anymore, but the postponed hugs, the lost dinners, the words of love that almost remained trapped forever. If a man the whole world calls a hero needed to face his own frailty to finally choose what matters, what does that say about how you've been living your days, your relationships, your plans that always get put off until later? Maybe the question isn't how much time you have, but what you're doing with the time that still exists in front of you today. And now, with all this in mind, what are you going to do differently when this video ends? Are you going to send a text to someone you love, apologize for something you've been choking on for years, schedule that coffee date you keep putting off, or simply turn off autopilot for one night and genuinely be present at home? If this story hit you in some way, harness that impact and turn it into action. Start with one small step, but start today. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to keep getting stories that poke, inspire, and remind us that life is finite. And share this video with someone who needs this reality check and hope. Sometimes, a single story is the missing push that changes an entire life's direction.